Click. All right, you got it.
Yep, and I'll let people know that when they come in.
All right, guys. Good luck, everybody. It's going to be great. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for
Yes.
coming. Hi, Al.
Oh, this is great. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes. Just letting a few more people in and then we'll get going.
Yeah, we had 60 registrants. So big list of people signed up. We'll see who actually attends. Sometimes people aren't able to attend, but it's exciting that at least 60 people signed up. That's great.
Just going to ask everyone that's joined us, if you're able just to mute for now, that would be fantastic. Still got people coming in, so we're just going to give it another minute.
Yep, I'm still getting people coming.
Okay, well, we'll get going, and then Christine, if more people arrive, you can let them in. So thanks everyone. Welcome to Athlete Wellness Consultants and our presentation tonight. Just a little bit of housekeeping. First off, we are recording the session, and that's just so that we can send it out to the people that signed up. So you will get an email afterwards with the recording, and we will be putting it on our website as well. If everyone can kind of keep themselves muted at the moment, that would just be really fantastic. We are going to have plenty of time for questions today. We're really excited to have our experts with us, so we're going to leave a lot of time for you guys to be able to ask questions. But for now, if you can keep yourselves on mute. We love to see who's here, but of course, if you're not able to keep your camera on, that is understandable as well. It'd be great when we come to questions if you're able to deliver that question with your camera on, that would be awesome. We're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves, but what we would also love is that if you guys could pop your name in the chat and where you're coming from and either your position or the club that you're coming from. We really like to know who's joining us. So if you have a moment through the presentation and the discussion to just pop that in the chat, that would be really great. So I'll start with a little bit about athlete wellness consultants. So myself and Christine developed athlete wellness consultants out of really a shared passion for wanting to support, promote, and educate around athlete mental health. We've given several presentations around athlete mental health and different areas affecting athlete mental health. But both of us are very keen to promote a holistic approach to working with athletes. And we know that, physical and mental health go hand in hand with each other. And nutrition has been an area that's been very, very important for both of us in our work, both from being athletes ourselves and coming from a mental health perspective. So that's why we really wanted to bring in Julie and Liz today, to kind of give their expert views and their experiences to really help guide this discussion around athlete and nutrition. So I'm going to not talk too much today. I'm just going to introduce myself and then pass it along the line, and then we're going to get going with some of our questions. I'm Roz, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. By now, you would have been able to tell that I'm not from America originally. I am from Great Britain, but I'm here in Colorado Springs. I currently work with athletes and non-athletes at a college level, and I have been fortunate enough to work in two Olympics in Brazil and in Tokyo. in athlete care. And I was also an athlete myself for many, many years. I competed for Great Britain in kickboxing and retired early due to hip arthritis and needing to have a hip replacement. So, both working for a long time with athletes and also being an athlete myself really developed both my experience and my passion for working with athletes and supporting their mental health. I'm going to pass over to Christine before we pass over to our experts.
Thanks, Ross. That was a great intro. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Christine Mosier. I am the co-founder of Athlete Wellness Consultants with Ross, and I also have my own private psychotherapy practice in Massachusetts, where I see athlete clients and non-athlete clients. And I also started this with Ross to, again, like she said, educate athletes, coaches, teams about mental health. I think we're trying to help normalize the conversation around athlete wellness and try to erase the stigma of talking about athlete mental health and providing educational opportunities for athletes and coaches and teams and other professionals that work with athletes. So we're kind of trying to create more of an awareness of the different issues that athletes face. And again, I was also an athlete. I went to Boston College where I played soccer. And after college, I continued to play in some women's leagues. And I did some coaching, some high school teams and women's teams, a lot of youth soccer teams, and started the Cape Cod Women's Soccer League in Massachusetts. So I've had many different hats as far as being an athlete and a coach and working in the athlete world now in the mental health arena. So that's a little bit about me. And now I will pass the torch to Julie Nicoletti.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me. And Christine and Roz, thank you so much for coordinating. I said to Christine that I think this is the most organized panel I've ever been a part of. So I appreciate all of the behind the scenes work that they've done. Um, my name is Julie Nicoletti. I'm a pharmacist and sports nutritionist, which I know is sort of a unique combination. But I have a private practice in Westwood, Massachusetts, and I'm the team nutritionist for the Boston Bruins. I did not play a college sport, but I since then have continued to be active and am an Ironman triathlete. I've run countless marathons and half marathons, and so endurance tends to be what I gravitate towards. You're up, Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Dominic. I am not an endurance athlete. Um, Distance is not my friend. Um, but I am currently the women's national team assistant director for USA Basketball. So I have a lot of extensive experience in the NGB space, the Olympic movement. So I've worked with figure skating quite some time ago, as well as with USA Boxing. And then I was also an athlete as well. So I did basketball, track in college, and then post collegiately, I was a track athlete, and I was a thrower. So I threw the discus. So that's where the no distance like endurance comes from. And I made our world team in 2013, and I was an Olympic alternate in 2016. And then decided to retire and be on the other side of the aisle and helping athletes pursue their dreams.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Julie. We're super excited to have you here and all of your experience. The way that we're going to roll today, guys, is we're going to be asking Julie and Liz some questions that we've kind of worked on in terms of helping inform kind of our knowledge and all of our knowledge together about some of these more specifics to do with athletes and nutrition. And then we're going to have this a good amount of time at the end. We want to hear from you. We want to answer questions and we want to hear your comments. So we're going to kick off. I'm going to hand back over to Christine to kind of ask Julie some questions and we'll keep moving through Julie and Liz and bring it back to you guys afterwards.
Great. Thanks, Ross. So Julie, can you tell us your work, a little bit about your work as an athlete nutritionist and how you came to be in this profession? And then also, what kind of clients do you like to work with and how did you get to work with the Boston Bruins?
Okay. As I said, I'm a pharmacist and a sports nutritionist, so a little bit of a non-traditional path in that I was a pharmacist for 18 years and then became a little frustrated that I was dispensing medication without any lifestyle modification counseling. And so that was the first piece that made me want to think more about nutrition as medicine or food as medicine. And then at the time, I was trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon and met myself with a couple of sports nutritionists, understanding that there was a connection between nutrition and performance, but not knowing the details and how to actually put the pieces together for myself. And that started me on a journey with sports nutrition and the athlete mentality that I enjoy so much. At the time, I was 38, and somebody asked me if I wanted to work with women my age, and that was not at all the demographic that I was going for. Just knowing my friends and how they ate and drank, I, definitely gravitated towards athletes. So my private practice, I see a variety of athletes in a wide range of sports, from middle school to professional. Um, and everything from, wrestling and figure skating and dancing to lacrosse and field hockey and soccer and basketball and football and lots of hockey. I worked with a Boston College hockey player who then referred me to a former teammate of his who at the time was the captain of the Providence Bruins, Tommy Cross. And Tommy had a great season after we worked together. And on his exit interview, Don Sweeney, who's the GM of the Bruins, asked Tommy what he had done differently. And Tommy spoke about our work together. And Don Sweeney called me. And that's how I started with the Bruins 10 seasons ago.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow, what
Thank
a great
you.
story. Um, all right, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. It's really cool. Do you tailor your program specifically to each individual athlete's goals, or is it a one size fits all type of thing? What do you do?
No, it's very tailored and very specific. My process starts with an online intake form, so I get to know just the basics of an athlete, their goals, their schedule, their food preferences, any allergies they may have. And then I ask them to take photos for 3 days of everything they eat and drink without making any changes. And so by the time we meet, we have a lot of information to comb through. And I really try to understand, for example, do they have a 6 a.m. lift, and then are they going to school? And so how are they managing their fuel eating so early in the morning and then, having to take a shower and get right to homeroom or to class or to advisory or wherever they're going. Um, or it could be a situation where an athlete's goals might differ. So perhaps that same athlete who has a 6 a.m. lift is trying to lean out a little bit, or maybe they're trying to gain weight. I see a lot of high school boys who are looking to gain weight, to be a little bit faster, a little bit bigger and stronger, and yet there are plenty of athletes who also need to lean out to be a little quicker. So yes, it's very much tailored to an athlete's food preferences, their any dietary restrictions, whether they bring their lunch or buy their lunch or um, any other scenario that you can think of, I customize for.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you really do a very thorough intake and assessment. You really take it into the whole picture of that athlete, everything that they're eating, drinking over a course of 3 days, and then analyzing it, reviewing that with them, and
Yeah,
looking at where you can make some changes.
exactly.
That's amazing. Okay. What are some of the concepts you teach your athletes on how to properly fuel for their sport? And do different sports require different types of fueling?
Certainly, different sports require different types of fueling. Um, but there are a couple of principles in terms of that might apply to everyone. For example, hydration. So an athlete is 8 to 10% faster, 10 to 12% stronger when they're fully hydrated. Their muscles are less likely to tear, strain, pull, prematurely fatigue, or cramp. They're more mentally clear and more coordinated when they're fully hydrated. So we talk a lot about drinking more water and less of everything else and go through all of those things. For example, energy drinks or alcohol or caffeine, or soda or juice or milk, whatever it happens to be. We talk about it all. Electrolytes, we definitely touch upon. So hydration first off. And then the second principle that I think affects and applies to everyone would be to eat more of the food that you recognize and less of what you don't, meaning your food really should run, swim, fly, grow from the ground, or fall from a tree, and you should be able to recognize it. So more clean, real food, but understanding that perfection is not realistic. And so that's why I say more of what you recognize and less of what you don't. So an example of that might be for a middle school athlete or a high school athlete, I might say, if you love chicken ziti broccoli, then maybe you double the chicken, triple the broccoli, and quarter the ziti, so that you have more of the food that runs, swims, flies, grows from the ground, or falls from a tree, and less of the processed food. So um, that's another principle that I think would affect everybody. And then the third one would be to find your protein first and add three colors to your plate. And that's not to say that protein is more important than carbohydrates or fat. It just means that protein tends to require a little more thought. I could grab an apple, some carbohydrates, and run out the door. I could grab some nuts and run out the door, but I can't grab an egg or a chicken breast and run out the door. So that's why I say start with your protein and add three colors. And depending on the age of the athlete with whom I'm working, I will tell them that ketchup doesn't count.
That's awesome. I love that. Do
Yeah.
people generally have, a positive reaction when they first start working with you and having, you giving them these new ideas that might be very new to them?
Yes, I would say that they do. I also would like to think that I'm in tune to where an athlete is starting from and how much I'm asking of them initially. And sometimes I'll even ask a question. I'll say, there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just looking for your approach. Are you somebody who the example that I often use is coffee because it for high school athletes, many of them are not drinking it, but some of them are. So I would say, if you were putting two caramel swirls and four sugars in your coffee, and I told you that we needed to change that, would you say, okay, tomorrow I won't put any in? Or were you the type of person who would say, okay, for a week I'll go down to three-quarters of what I'm doing and then half of what I'm doing? And so I get a sense of whether an athlete wants to go from here to here right away or whether they want to kind of tick it off in stages.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for all that. We are going to pass the torch over to Liz and Ross, who are gonna, Ross is gonna ask Liz some questions. At the end of all the questions that we've prepared, we will have time for the audience to participate and ask their own questions to either of the panelists.
Thanks, Christine. And yeah, write down anything that comes to your mind whilst Julie and Liz are speaking for any questions when we get through our set. So I just kind of wanted to segue in. You were talking then, Julie, about like different needs for different individuals as well as different sports. And so, Liz, I was just wondering, having your experience in working in more than two sports, working in basketball at the moment, previously working in boxing, and then obviously figure skating as well. Have you noticed similarities and differences in the different sports that you've been working in, and kind of noticed a big difference there, or are there some kind of similarities across the board?
Well, obviously with what I just like the most two recent sports I've been with boxing and basketball, boxing's a very individual sport just in nature. You're not competing in the ring together. But basketball obviously is very team oriented. And so sometimes that's just kind of how you have to approach it with athlete needs. Is that in boxing, athletes are a little more used to being tailored to what they want, like individually. They don't necessarily love group think or group movement. But with basketball, it's kind of built into the nature of the sport. So I want to say get away with, but like it's easier to have the group kind of do something together than it is with an individual sport. But not to say that there's not team aspects in individual sports as well. And so, the boxing, a lot of times because they are competing at different times on different days, that was definitely a challenge, just trying to manage all the schedules. And I don't know if everyone's aware, but at the Olympic level of boxing, every day they compete, they have to weigh in and make weight. It's very different than what people think about with professional boxing, is like weigh in the day before, can fuel up, but that's not the case with boxers. And so it's really, really grueling. And so you're kind of around sometimes some, I don't want to say crappy, but they're hungry athletes that are trying to stay fueled, but also keeping in mind that they need to make weight potentially the next day after competing and are exhausted and all that kind of stuff. So, but athletes are athletes, and you just have to kind of help them along. And also just knowing, one thing that I've noticed is, like, because I've worked with different levels too. So I would work anywhere from like kind of our junior youth level in both sports all the way up to our senior level. And the depth of knowledge that the athletes have is very obviously different. But I also don't like to make assumptions about what people know either.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate you sharing that with us. And yes, I'm sure that there's definitely those differences, and especially in terms of timing, like you spoke about, in terms of different times of competing and when you can eat. So, having those opportunities to maybe share meals aren't always possible because people are getting up to weigh in at 6 a.m. So they're not going to eat dinner at 9 p.m. when someone else has just finished competing. So I worked in boxing in 2 of the Olympics, and my role was athlete care, and food was very important. That people would get very disappointed if the competition had ran late and then there was no food available at the athlete village or in the competition. It's like a really big part of preparation for sport events that people don't think about, because you have to have a certain amount of food available when boxers have weighed in. You have to have liquid and rehydration available on the regular. So yeah, it's certainly a kind of an intricacy that comes with different sports. And I just wanted to kind of move on. You talked a little bit about your experiences as an athlete and also working in the Olympic movement. So I was wondering about your experiences specifically as an athlete. So was there things that you wished you knew about nutrition when you were an athlete? And what are some of the positives or not so positive experiences you had as an athlete around kind of nutrition and food? And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about where you got to in terms of being an alternate and being in the Olympic Training Center and the kind of different levels you were at, and if that changed in terms of your access to nutrition support.
Yeah. Well, so in college, I was a dual sport athlete. So I went to the University of Minnesota. I'm from Minnesota, so you might hear it in my O's a little bit. But I wanted to get far away from home, and I chose the school 20 minutes away from my parents. But very, very happy I went there. But I think there was just, like, again, with the basketball, it kind of became a joke. Like, we just kind of kept getting fed, and it was just like sometimes, not to say that they didn't factor in nutrition, but sometimes it's just like getting calories in. That's kind of what it felt like. And very much repetitive in some ways. But I also, now being on kind of the administrative side, you kind of get that a little bit more too. And trying to plan menus, it's quite a challenge. And then with track, we did have a nutritionist. And she was she was a distance runner and maybe understood a little bit more of like what a distance runner wanted and needed. And not saying that she didn't have the knowledge, or that space, but it didn't really click. And I was a person, I did shot put and discus in college. And you can't tell by me sitting right now, but like I'm over 6 feet. I'm muscular, but for a shot putter, when some people expect as a typical body type, I did not have that. I was very athletic. But I was trying to put on muscle mass, and it just wasn't quite clicking. And so that was definitely a challenge. And then kind of took a little time off. And when I started to kind of compete in the professional space for track, I just focused on discus. So I didn't have to worry about gaining the weight. Still needed to be very strong and be able to recover. But when I first started getting back into throwing, I didn't really have support. I didn't have a facility to train at. I was literally throwing off of a sidewalk in a park. Like that was where I was throwing, and I was like, this is as flat of a sidewalk surface as I can find. Trying to get in my training while it was daylight was definitely a challenge. And then I was also at that time was working for figure skating, so I was working a full-time job while trying to train. And so it was a huge challenge in trying to uh, get everything that I needed in, do my job, but also trying to progress as an athlete. And so it wasn't until actually I did well in 2011, trying to remember my timeline. In 2011, I did pretty well at nationals, placed fifth, I believe. And so that kind of started to get me a little more access to resources. I also had found a training partner who had access to those resources, and I would just kind of tag along. And then because one thing I love about service providers is that they want to help, and they kind of sometimes get annoyed with the red tape that is there as well. So they would let me tag along and provide some of that advice that I needed, or access to some sports medicine, or I would get little nutrition tips that would kind of help. And then thankfully, after 2012, I was able to start training at the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista. The training center has changed a little bit since then, but at the time it was a full Olympic Training Center site, a lot of track athletes. And that's when I really got access to all the different service providers. But I had to work really, really hard to get to that point. And, I kind of wonder about what would have happened had I had access to that earlier. I get that it's hard to get everyone, and predict who that is. They only have so much time and resources on their end. But then I had access to a nutritionist there, and really started to grasp some of the concepts, because I think a lot of hard part is there's an assumption that something, or that you were taught this. No clue. I didn't even know exactly how much protein I was getting. I was never tracking my food. I didn't know the carbs, all the things, and then what were my targets. I had no idea. So I think there was a lot of assumptions of what I knew. And even now, where it's I wish I would have paid, I'm not saying I didn't pay attention. I definitely took advantage of it, but I wish I would know more. So yeah, that's a long, convoluted answer.
No, I think it's just a really good point to make, that sometimes the higher up you become, or the more successful you've become, people perhaps assume you know more than you do, because you become talented at your sport, and people maybe expect that you have the background in nutrition, or PT or mental health, like these areas. We find when people, there may be quite a lot of support in college, but then when people get to the next level, or a certain level, then there isn't necessarily, people just assume that you're kind of there, so I think that happens a lot with elite athletes. So it's really helpful for you kind of remind us all of that as well. Just one more question, I think, and this kind of feeds into your own experience, but now that you're working with athletes, what do you think the benefits are for the athletes that you work with of having good nutritional support? What do you see as the benefits? Yeah, what have you witnessed kind of firsthand as being a positive of having that support available?
I think everyone, you've kind of all mentioned, is food is important to an athlete, and especially when you're overseas in an unfamiliar area. So you try to provide comfort where you can. So quote unquote, I just want to say sometimes good nutritional support is just providing a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or going to McDonald's and getting them some calories. Literally have done that before when we're in a country that food's unfamiliar for them, or the food safety is maybe a little questionable, and you just want to make sure everyone's okay. So I'm not a picky eater. I will try something. But there have definitely been times on the road I've eaten a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So, it's providing that, knowing the athlete feels supported and paying attention. And we do have a lot of different dietary needs. And so I am by no means an expert. So I reach out to the experts. We've had, vegans on the team. I'm not a vegan. I don't know what, I can say, oh, tofu or whatever, but it's like there's so like the vegan menu is so broad, and I just want to reach out to the experts, like, hey, can you give me some suggestions? Or we have gluten-free or dairy-free. And so trying to accommodate everyone, but only having so much availability on the menu is definitely a challenge. And you just try to make the athlete feel seen and heard as best as you can. And again, sometimes you run to the store for peanut butter and jelly.
I think that's a really great point, and something we didn't, we haven't touched on, but like especially in terms of like food intolerances or food personal choices or religious choices around food, I think is a really good point to make, because sometimes it isn't necessarily just about restrictions due to intake because we're making weight or something like that. It is generally to do with allergies or intolerances or personal choice as well. So I think that's a really good point to make, especially I guess when you're working with a team, because you can't just kind of like broadly cover the whole of the women's basketball team by feeding them this one thing, this one meal as such. So I think that's a really good point to make. So thanks, Liz. It was really, really, really helpful bringing some of those ideas to life, both from your own experiences as an athlete and working with athletes. And I think before we come on to some questions, we're nearly ready for that, to fire back at Julie and Liz. Really just wanted to kind of like bring it back into kind of like the mental health arena, because that's what we do at Athlete Wellness Consultants. So the reason it's important is that we never consider an athlete without all of the holistic parts to them. So whenever we're working with a team or an individual, we're looking at, what kind of nutrition are they getting in? What is their sleep like? Have they had injuries? When was the last time they went to their PCP for a health assessment? So we know all of that has an effect on mental health, but we also know mental health has an effect on all of those other areas. And when it comes to nutrition and diet, especially, I was in kickboxing for 18 years of my life, and I would say I was probably on a diet for 18 years of my life as well. I think athletes have to be quite a type A personality. We have to be committed to things like that. But I definitely observed instances where it can go to the point where it's unhealthy or obsessional, when you're being asked to, still fight in the same category that you've been fighting in for 10 years. But like as a female, you've grown and, your bones get heavier, or whatever the non-scientific way to look at it. But when you're trying to make weight time and time again, and kind of being asked to do that, how that can affect your mental health. We know that athletes are more likely to suffer from eating disorders, from other types of addiction, because what comes with a really great personality of being quite addictive and quite ruthless and quite type A can also kind of spread into some difficulties. So I think diet and nutrition is one of those areas that we can see problems, and Julie maybe will speak to that a little bit later, and perhaps there'll be some questions from you about what do we do when we get to that stage that eating does look problematic or disordered. So I really just wanted to bring it back to when, and I know some of you in the room are mental health professionals, and I'm sure you'll agree, or if you're not already, kind of working with like your colleagues in health across the nutrition, the athletic directors. The last presentation we gave was about injuries and the importance of the kind of teamwork around the physical rehabilitation of an injury, but also the mental health aspect. So this all ties in really nicely to that athlete as a human being. So I just wanted to pass that topic over to Christine really quickly, because it's certainly an area that she's really worked in for a long time. So Christine, I was just going to see if you wanted to comment a little bit around the kind of food and eating and mental health and some of the issues you see. And then we'll open it up to questions for our experts and to me and Christine if there are some.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Well, I think you touched on it really well. And I think, like you said, athletes can tend to have a perfectionist mindset, and that can be good as far as making you do well at your sport. You're very dedicated and committed to your sport, helps you succeed, but it can also be detrimental if it goes to the extreme, like you said, and that can go towards anything in their lives. And eating is something that we all need to do. And it's good to learn proper nutrition and how to fuel properly for your sport. But there are times when certain athletes may take that, like you said, to the extreme, and it could become an unhealthy, obsessional type of thing. So in that, in that case, we have to look out for those kinds of things as mental health professionals and keep an eye on that and try to help athletes if they're, stepping into that danger zone, try to help them have a healthier mindset about food and nutrition. And another thing that Liz mentioned was about body image. She said, like being a bigger female athlete and trying to bulk up for basketball and get stronger and build up that muscle mass. I think that you also mentioned, Liz, about the struggle that female athletes go through when they're trying to be an athlete and having to fuel for their sport, and maybe their sport calls for them being a bigger sized woman, and the internal struggle that athletes have with trying to maintain their athletic body versus their aesthetic body. So I think that we have, as women, a lot of pressures on us to maintain this ideal body type that societal norms kind of imposes on us. And sometimes that can cause an internal struggle for female athletes and male athletes trying to, fuel properly for your sport so you do well and succeed, but yet at the same time trying to be a normal human being that fits into society. And sometimes those two ideals contradict each other. So I think it's important just to be aware of these things. And, if you're a coach working with athletes or an athlete who's struggling with some of these ideas, it's a good idea to seek out professional help, consultation, therapy, possibly. But like reaching out to the experts in the field, like Liz said, she doesn't know everything about nutrition, but she wants to be supportive of her athletes. So when she needs to, she reaches out to the professionals for support. And people like Julie are the types of people that you would reach out to about that. And people like Ross or I are the people you would reach out to if it has to do with a mental health issue. So it is important for teams and athletes and coaches to recognize if they don't have education or expertise in a certain area, there are people out there who do. And that's a good time to reach out to those people.
Thanks.
Julie, I just wanted to also, I noticed you like when I think it was Liz, or actually both Liz and Ross were talking about how we assume that, when athletes get to a certain level, whether it be a professional or Olympic, we assume that they know all these things about athlete nutrition, and they don't necessarily. And I saw you kind of nod your head about that. So I don't know, do you notice that, some of your professional athletes, you assume that they might know these things, but they actually don't, and they need some help with that?
Yes, certainly. I try not to assume anything about anybody's past experience, either with a college nutritionist or dietitian or with their own personal experiences, what their food situation was growing up. But I will say that in the past 10 years with the Bruins, I have definitely seen a shift in the knowledge of players. It used to be that our younger players would come into development camp, and I felt like I needed to convince them that nutrition mattered. And now that's not the case at all. They come in, they understand the impact of nutrition and how important it is. And now they just want the answers. They just want to know what they should be eating. Um, yeah,
That's a nice shift. I like that.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
great. It's wonderful to see.
yeah, that is good. I think, Ross, now is a good time for us to open up the conversation to the participants. If anybody has any questions for Liz or Julie, or any comments or anything you'd like to add to the conversation, where now's the time to do it. You can either raise your hand or write it in the chat box, whatever feels comfortable to you.
Feel free to unmute now if you have a question as well. We'd love to kind of see and hear from you. I'm going to put Judy's details in the chat box, just in case anyone has a question for her off the discussion. And when we finish, we will be sending out the recording and Judy's contact details and ours as athlete wellness consultants as well. So don't feel that you need to kind of write everything down now. But please do go ahead if you have any questions for these guys.
I have one follow-up question for Julie, if that's okay. Just I'll keep talking. But you at the beginning when you were describing how you help educate your athlete clients, you talked about your kind of third concept was protein first, then add 3 colors. Can you just add a little bit more explanation to what you mean about the 3 colors?
Sure. So, what I'm really looking for them to do is to add some carbohydrates and fats, mostly vegetables and fruit. Because if we think about a traditional, say, maybe a student athlete, um, whose lunch might be a chicken patty sandwich and some waffle fries, everything is tan. And so I'm just asking them to get out of the box. And for a college athlete, sometimes that means, or even some of the private schools, they need to go to multiple areas to eat. They may need to get the hot entree protein, but then go to the salad bar, and then maybe to the pasta bar or something else to kind of fill out their plate. And so really encouraging them. Um, I do a lot of work at a private school in Massachusetts, and one of there's a James Beard award-winning chef who's the director of culinary services there. So they really have a wonderful opportunity to try all kinds of beautiful food. And it's an all boys school, and I watch some of the boys with like a bowl of pasta and butter. And so for those athletes in particular, I really try to get them to try new things, add some color to their plate somewhere.
Mm,
So that's really what I mean by that. Yeah.
okay. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Got a question in the chat, and then Dr. Jasmine, you have your hand up. So I think I may go for Dr. Jasmine, and then Ellen, I will ask your question after. So I don't know if you can unmute Dr. Jasmine to ask the question.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I am joining you all from Belize, actually. I am on vacation, but I wanted to join you all.
Thank
So super to be here. I have a question. So I was awarded a grant from Food Lion to provide nutrition to the athletes that I work with. And I primarily work with underserved or marginalized youth at several local high schools here and then some college students as well. But from a resource perspective, is there anything that is out there that could inform or just to help me best spend the funds that were given to me to show athletes, how to eat, what products to purchase? I'm considering maybe doing some type of live demonstration for them with the funds. Just any type of guidance in that realm.
Liz, do you want to speak to that or?
I don't, maybe you might be a better resource
Okay.
for that, but I'm thinking.
Yes. I know I'm thinking a little bit too about resources. I love the idea of live demonstrations. And one that comes to mind quickly would be like a smoothie demonstration because that's such an easy thing to make, and it can be using frozen fruit or some frozen vegetables and some yogurt or protein powder, for example. I think it's a pretty easy way to get a lot of nourishment in. Um, did you say how old your athletes are?
Yes, this program is actually for high school athletes.
Okay,
Ninth grade through 12th grade is the target for this particular program.
right. So yes, I think sampling is a great idea. The other idea would be something like, to have them do a little hands-on cooking class where you could do something like the nothing that you have to actually use an oven for, but you could make overnight oats or little protein bites, and then let them try that, let them sample them.
I've
But I
also,
don't I don't know of I'll have to give a little bit of thought to some resources that might be helpful.
and I did see somebody in the chat, and I do know this is something that like the USOPC does, and they have a testing kitchen, and it's very, very popular with the athletes. There's a recipe they all make, and I think just like something I don't necessarily know what the resource would be, but I think just too at that age, how many of them have actually really done any cooking, like basic cooking skills, and just understanding that because even as an adult, it's like, oh, I don't want to touch the chicken. Like, I mean, like, let's be honest. And you have to get over that. But I think it's just sometimes exposure, and making it competitive. But just I don't know exactly what maybe somebody would know, but just yeah, even just access to like basic cooking knowledge and how to feel comfortable in the kitchen, so that they can
Yeah.
maybe make some better
Yeah.
choices.
And I
Thank you
think,
all so much. That was very helpful.
well, and
Good.
Toby, just to jump in there, because Toby had put in the about college programs that take athletes to the grocery store. And I agree with that. I used to work in fostering and foster care, and that's what I would do with my young people that were learning to be independent, age 16, is I would give them a budget and make it kind of a fun. You got $10. We would have researched a recipe, send them around the supermarket. What can we pick up? Competition is always quite a good thing. So like Liz says, I've been to the test kitchen at the USOPC and it's great to be able to go and do that. It's like a team bonding activity so that it becomes like fun. It's like part of the routine. It's not like, oh, we're going to have to learn about nutrition. It actually serves as both purposes because you can do it as a team bonding activity, go to the shops, try some new things. I find a little bit of peer pressure helps sometimes when we're trying to try new things out as well. Having
Yes.
worked in a lot of different countries with different athletes, you kind of a little bit of peer pressure goes a long way. So I think I agree with everyone in a group. And Jackie said that's another thing that the dietitians do. They go out, yeah, to the grocery stores, do some of that practical stuff. When you've got kids that age, they're teenagers, they're going to learn better by doing as well. So making things, being proud, being able to take things home to their families as well to try. So I hope that helps, Dr. Jasmine. That's great that you've got that grant. I think especially for that population in terms of helping to, increase knowledge for kind of future as well. I think that's fantastic. So thank
Yes.
I'm going to go back to Ellen's question because this comes to you, I think, Julie. What is your opinion on micronutrient approach to nutrition where you have protein, fat, and carbs amount identified for your needs and goals?
I think that really goes back to treating each athlete individually. That's not something I would do at all with a high school athlete and not a college athlete either. I see the value there for some athletes, especially those in weight restricted sports. But really, that's not something that I do off the bat with my athletes because I could give them their macros or their macronutrient goals, but then in order for them to understand whether or not they're hitting them, it means that they need to track them. And in order to track them, they need to know how much they're eating, which means that they're weighing and measuring food. And that tends not to lead to healthy habits. So that's one that sometimes I might give people a range for things and give them very um, uh, sort of broad things. Like, for example, you need 100 grams of protein, and 25 grams is about 4 ounces, which is about the size of the palm of your hand. Like, very estimated, so that it doesn't lead down a non-healthy path.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for that one. Toby, and this is for both of you. Have either of you ever had to help with nutrition of female athletes who are also struggling with PCOS or hormone imbalances? So, I think this could probably go for both of you as well, because Liz, I know you've worked with like youth teams, sorry, female and male athletes and adult teams. But Julie, I don't know if you want to speak on that first in terms of nutrition and hormone imbalances.
Yes. Nutrition can play a huge role in hormone imbalances. One thing in particular would be for an athlete to really watch um, their carbohydrate intake because of the insulin resistance that's often associated with PCOS, but not in a restrictive way, just watching where their carbs are coming from, perhaps more fiber, so more vegetables and fruit versus things like bread and pasta. Or whole grains, something like a rice or quinoa, something like that. And also many athletes with PCOS do well on a gluten-free diet. So that's something that I would consider talking to them about as well.
I think I just add there that hormone imbalances and hormone issues plays a massive role in mental health as well. So when we're screening for mental health, we also look at physical health and any conditions because we know that the two can, one can affect the other. So it's another one of those areas that as mental health practitioners we're really aware of as well. So aware that, it can affect diet and physicality, but also affecting mental health as well. So I think it's a really important topic, Toby. Thank you for bringing that up. I just want to really quickly, I didn't want to lose anyone's comments, and thank you, Dr. Hilliard, talking about your organization. And Dr. Hilliard has put a link up there to her website. And you asked a question about excited learning, sorry, really interested in what holistic development of athletes means. So it sounds like you've been doing a lot of work in that. And I think that's a really interesting point because I think that we all have, we all come from different perspectives and different ideas. For me, I think that I like to see the athlete as a whole from a biopsychosocial perspective. So I like to look at the athlete as the athlete as they are as the sport performer, but also where have they come from? What are their background experiences? What are their cultural experiences? What are their experiences at home? I always like to understand where my athlete had come from. That helps then with their, explains if they're not coming to training or they're always turning up late or they are hungry or they don't, have access to some of the support that other people do. For me, and I guess it's a social work perspective, that is something that's really important to me, but also the psycho and the social, the bio side of it and looking into nutrition, physical exercise, injuries, medications, illnesses, and history of that. So I guess I see holistic of kind of addressing the athlete as a whole, both where they are in society and who they are, as well as their individual kind of biological, physiological, and sociological makeup. But I don't know if Christine, you want to speak to that one more, but Dr. Hilliard, thank you for putting the link to your organization. I think that will be really helpful as part of this conversation.
Ross and I are both, our backgrounds are both as clinical social workers, so we pretty much have the same perspective on how we view individuals and athletes. And our social work education teaches us that human beings are all part of systems. So we have a systems perspective, which is similar to what she was just saying. We're in our family system, we're in our school system, we're in our town system, our community, our church system, our wider community, our sports system, our team system. So all these different aspects of our lives that we are surrounded by are all influential in our mental health. And I thought it was interesting what Liz said, and kind of funny and true, that as we might have all the knowledge in the world and all the good intentions in the world, but like, hey, you're going on a road trip, there's nowhere to go to get like quinoa. So we're going to be stopping at McDonald's and we're going to have a cheeseburger. So you also have to learn, I think, how to be flexible with yourself. And that's also part of like how therapy can help too. Sometimes, like I said before, we can have a perfectionist mindset and we'd be very fixed on, no, we have to do it this way. Julie said, I have to eat this and we have to do it like this. And you can't, like, it's good to try to like be a good student and do your best and get a good grade. But sometimes that opportunity doesn't exist. You're in another country or you're traveling or, you're the only bus stop that you have is, at Chili's or McDonald's or whatever it might be. So you have to be flexible with yourself and give yourself a little bit of leeway to understand, like, you can't always do it perfectly. And sometimes you just have to go with what's there for you.
I did want to add to just a little bit of that and coming, as Roz mentioned earlier too, of just like that type A, that is me. But I think like as I progressed in my career, I had a really fight like perfectionist tendency, like not even just with food, but like in my training or like a specific throw, like, oh my gosh, I want to keep trying to get this one sorry, my dog, concept. And so you really don't want to push that like it has to be done this way, because then when you are on the road and you are competing and something pops up that is not planned, it can really mess with like where you are mentally and how you think you can perform. So sometimes you want to be like anti-perfect. I don't know, just you want to have the kids or your athletes ready for whatever may come, and not pushing. It's not really like, Julie's concept of like about or approximate, because you're never going to have anything perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Liz. And I think there is something to be said also for going back to basics, especially when you're traveling, making sure that people take the snacks that they like with. USA Boxing were one of the, like historically, the ones that bought their whole Walmart cupboards with them to competitions that we'd have to accommodate because they brought their dietitians and their food and they had it shipped over before, and looked at menus. And I have to say Team GB do that a lot as well. But it's like actually when you come to a competition, speaking as an athlete who was someone that got very nervous, I just like to know I had some of my home comforts. And so taking the time to get to know your athletes, and like if their favorite snack is Cheetos, let's going to make sure we have some of those with us, and keeping some of that familiarity. And I think that's what you were saying, Julie, by getting pictures and knowing what they're eating already. You're not, if someone's never eaten quinoa before, they're not going to eat that. But if they like pasta, then we can add to that. If they love a pasta meal, awesome, but let's just chuck in some more protein. So
Yeah.
I am aware of the time. I think I just want to kind of close by saying, I just want to ask Julie and Liz, if you can just give like one top tip that you would give around supporting athletes and their nutrition. If you can let me know that, and then we will wrap things up. Always like an expert finish, leave us with something.
Yes, a top tip. Something that Liz said initially about trying to help the athlete be heard and seen as much as possible. I think that that resonated with me. I think that I certainly try to do that, but haven't really put that language around it. And I do think that understanding that if you're supporting athletes, that they are all different. They have different palates and different desires and different goals and different choices and different tendencies. And we really need to meet them where they are, and then just take it bite by bite, one bite at a time.
Love that.
Julie, that's awesome. Anything you would add, Liz?
What Julie said was great. But I would just say, as if you're a provider, just do the best you can. Like you're not going to be perfect either. And yeah, just also just enjoy the fact that you do get to interact with the athletes. Like you matter in that space. So, just be yourself. Don't be afraid.
That's really good to hear, Liz. We appreciate that. I just put up our kind of details. If anyone wants to chat a little bit more about kind of doing some work together, thinking about the athlete as a whole, thinking about mental health and some of these other areas, please do reach out to us. Follow up with us on email. We'll send an email of the recording. We're always around just for a chat. We'll include Julie's information as well. And yeah, we just really, really appreciate everyone coming and joining us tonight. Look out for our next webinar, and have a great evening. And thanks again, Julie and Liz.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it. Hope you found this helpful.
Thank you.
All right.